Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Fearless Fridays, where we discuss strategies, tools, and tips to transform your fears into fuel to unlock your future potential, or rather, your true potential. Excuse me, 1 second, there's some background noise. Awesome. So thank you for joining us again this week. We have an amazing guest with us, which I'm going to introduce here just in 1 minute, Miss Charlene Harry. This week, we are going to be discussing communication boundaries. While we're waiting for a few more people to come in, if you have not done so already, please just take this time to silence your phone, sit back, get relaxed. If you're driving, pull over to the side. We don't want you to have any accidents. But for the most part, just engage with us as we go through this next 30 to 40 minutes of conversation around communication boundaries. So we're about to get into it. Let me introduce to you Miss Charlene Harry. Charlene Harry is a woman who has defied the odds and succeeded in both her personal and professional life. Happily married with 4 children, Charlene knows what it means to overcome challenges and obstacles. With over 25 years of experience as an engineer in both corporate and government roles, Charlene's diverse skills and unwavering determination have propelled her forward to become a successful business owner and author of personal development books. She is a fearless advocate for positive change and limitless possibilities. Let's put our hands together for Miss Charlene Harry.
Hey, everybody.
All right. Thank you for being here. So again, we're talking about communication boundaries today. So let me read to you the definition as it relates to how we're going to talk about it a little bit, and then we'll hear from Ms. Charlene. So when we talk about communication boundaries, we're talking about boundaries that refer to the limits and guidelines that individuals use to establish their interactions with others, right? They define what is acceptable, what is unacceptable, obviously, and respectful communication behavior that can help maintain healthy and balanced relationships. So that's the definition that I'm choosing for us to consider. But as you consider it, let's hear from Ms. Charlene. So first of all, Charlene, thank you again and welcome to the show. That's what I'm calling it, the show. So here's the first question for you today. How do you define communication boundaries, and how do they play a part in your personal and professional life? And certainly, please feel free to, again, as we read your introduction, you can say whatever else you'd like to say to the audience.
Well, Miss Talina, I am so excited to be here because there is nothing like having a conversation. There's nothing like having a conversation on our boundaries. It is so important that we understand the two. The communication boundaries, that's just like one thing that I think people aren't really thinking about when we think about communication, and there should be some boundaries that are set. I can tell you for myself, there is no relation if there's no communication. I say that all the time. Why? Because if I don't learn how to relate to someone, then how could I possibly be able to communicate with them? I often kid myself and say they know me as a person that talks to myself because I want to have a relationship with myself and understand myself. If I choose to want to have a conversation with someone else, I have to have that same kind of practice where I'm trying to have a relationship with you in order to communicate with you. So I always say, if there's no relation, there's no communication. And go ahead.
No, I was saying absolutely. I'm disagreeing with you.
I mean,
go ahead, please.
I was just saying because the idea of being able to communicate that whether we realize it or not, there's some boundaries, right? Like if you're not talking to me, there's a boundary there. But if I engage with you, if I try to relate with you, even with strangers, we do it all the time, right? Hello. Okay, we begin to open up that communication. But the key, like I heard you say, is that you expect some type of respect, right? So I expect and I set respect as the form of how we're going to create this relationship on the communication boundaries that we're walking into, because I have mine and you have yours. So how we're going to connect the two, and it's by that key word you said, which is respect. So we set the tone just by being, cordial, by saying hello and acknowledging someone. You know what I mean? Anybody ever heard?
I do.
You even heard the phrase, we joke about it all the time at work. It's nice to see you. And then the response is, it's nice to be seen, because it is nice to be seen. That whole seeing part, or saying hello to someone, is how you see them. It's how you open up the door to create that communication boundaries. It sets the tone for the respect. As simple as a hello, as simple as a smile. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes. Yes, I do. I do. Thank you. Looks like we have a couple of comments here. Well, first off, welcome, Theresa. I see Nicole has joined us. We've got Orlando that's also in the audience. Miss Yolanda, thank you all for joining. There's a comment that says, no relation, no communication. I love it. So that was from Mr. Orlando. So you dropped that nugget on us. Thank you so much for that. So again, as we continue with this conversation, I appreciate what you said in terms of how you identify those boundaries. Talk to us a little bit about what the boundaries are, communication boundaries are for you in the personal, in your professional world as a business owner.
Yes.
Yes.
So, it's so important that we respect one another in the business world. We may not always agree. We may not always come at it with the same kind of energy, but it's important that when I am working professionally in my environment, that I recognize that I have to first set the respect, right? You have to expect respect and set the respect. And so it's important to me in my business that when I'm talking to people that work for me, that I, try to take a step back to understand what it is that they're hearing, because that's a part of the relationship that we've begun. When you ask a question, you want to make sure you're listening for what you're hearing, for what they're saying, and understanding whether or not, like, I love when people say to me at work, let me repeat that back to you, right? That's what I use all the time. Or this is what I think I heard you say. Is that correct? Those type of phrases or communications really set the respect for saying, okay, I heard you say something, but let's make sure we're still in the same line of alignment in terms of what we're communicating, and we're communicating effectively because we're hearing the same things. We could say the same thing, but not hear the same thing. So it's important for us to make sure and take a moment. Did you understand what I said? Or could you play it back for me the way you understand it? And that is so key. I can tell you, just recently having to explain something to someone, it's one of my pet peeves, but you have to really get an understanding of how better to communicate by asking and making sure that they understand what it is you're asking of them to do. You follow what I'm saying?
I do. And let me ask you, because I know, people learn differently, they hear differently. Like you said, can you say that back to me so I can understand what you heard me say? What challenge have you found with that? And that's going to kind of lead us into the next question, which I'll pop up. But what are the challenges that you found with your staff? Because when you say that and then they repeat what they think they heard you say, which sounds very different from what you said. How do you respond to that? And how do you do that in that setting, allowing them to still, creating a space for them to be able to communicate with you in that manner, but without, it coming off as frustrated, or again, with respect?
Yes, respect is key, and remembering to set the respect even when you're hearing it back. So one of my challenges, I'll be frank with you guys, is that I can sometimes come off to be short. So I have to be mindful of that challenge that I have when it comes to repeating myself. I don't know if there's any mothers in the room. If there are any mothers in the room, but sometimes we just have to repeat ourselves and it gets to me. Okay, it gets to me. So it's something that I'm working through, and I notice I have to work through it while in my professional career as I work with other people. So being short with people is something I'm mindful of, is my challenge. And I don't want anyone to be disrespected in that time frame. And I want to be mindful of the time that it's taking for us to get through this. Or I like to think of this as, is this a priority, or is it a priority for me to focus on this one thing that we're talking about, or table it to something else, or leave that there for a minute. So oftentimes I will just try to move on to another task that maybe we can get through, as I myself try to figure out how can I restate the task. You know what I'm saying? How can I say it? Like you said, I really like how you say that, because so many people learn differently. And it is a challenge and a task as a business owner to know how does everyone learn, and then kind of pulling it out of your trainer's tip or your tools to figure out how best to communicate with that A type personality or that C type personality. So it takes time, but what I have found as a tool for me is sometimes to just think about the task at hand and the priority is set. Sometimes I'll just change or shift it, right? Like, let's work on something else. And in that something else, while that's still going on, I'm still figuring out how I can recommunicate the task and what I'm asking of them to do. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes. Thank you. I appreciate that. So let's move on to question number 3 now. So our third question is, so what tools, you talked about what you have in your tool chest, right? You just mentioned that, but what other tools, strategies, or tips can you share to help support healthy communication boundaries? Now, I'm looking to see if we had any updates or any other comments in the chat, and we haven't so far, but I'm thinking this is really one of those things that we all really want to know. How do we get better at this, right? Personally, especially in our business lives, right? So we're framing this in from a personal and business perspective, but we got to understand, like, business wise, if we don't get this stuff together, if we don't manage our communication, sometimes this trickles over into what we're doing and bringing home, and vice versa. So what tips do you have to help us with that?
Girl,
what do you use?
This is my favorite. Like I told you, sometimes it can cause a lot of emotions, right? Because I want to be short with you, but I have to remember that I have to have to set respect, and I have to give respect. So I have to design my emotional roller coaster. Now, I talk about the emotional roller coaster in my latest book that it was just published, called Co-Create with Confidence: How to Leverage Your Talent and Capitalize on Actually, it's how to leverage your voice and capitalize on your talent. Guys, when I say this just came out of me, it just came out of me the other day. So forgive me. I wrote it in 7 days and it was published in 90. But the name of the book is called Co-Create with Confidence: Leverage Your Voice and Capitalize Your Talent. One of the chapters in the book talks about designing your emotional roller coaster. To me, this is so key when it comes to communication, because like I said, when I know that my weakness is being short with people, I have to be mindful that that's not the way I want to come across, as cross, and then not getting anywhere. So when I feel as though it's getting ready to go down in that direction of a ride, I have to tell myself, how can I get back on track? Does that make sense? I really love the visual of the emotional roller coaster that I talk about in the book, because it helps you recognize when you are going down and you don't like it. How can you get back up? So you're, coasting on the roller coaster. And what I'll tell you is this: what I share in the book is that you want to give yourself a moment. Okay. You want to give yourself a moment. I have to, when I want to get that shortness out of me, give myself a moment to say, and I'll give you a couple of phrases that I use, that I share with the people that I'm working with. One is, I just need a minute, right? I just need a minute. Or you can say something like, can I have this conversation right now?
Mm.
Okay. Another one is my favorite. Can we table this and come back to it? I shared that earlier because it's kind of like along that lines of knowing that if you keep going down this rabbit hole of being frustrated where you're at in the communication, it's really not going to get any better. Okay. So you want to take some time and table it. I'll just share those with you and hope that if you like those tips, you will look into purchasing the book to get some more.
Absolutely. Thank you. Those are all. And big ups to the book. I've already purchased mine. I would encourage all of you that are watching to please go on Amazon and make that purchase. It is, when I tell you this woman is just on fire, when she said she wrote it in 7 and published in 90 or 30, excuse me, she not playing, y'all. She did that. She really did that. So anyway, she's really amazing. So thank you so much for that. I definitely appreciate the tips. We're going to continue with the conversation, but before we do, how can people reach you outside of purchasing your book on Amazon? How else can they find you just to spend some more time with you and get under your tutelage potentially if you have some things coming up? What does that look like and how can they reach you?
Yes, I am on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm also on Facebook, and I have a website if all else fails because some of the tags can be different. CharleneHarrySpeaks.com, but you can reach me by LinkedIn or my website, CharleneHarrySpeaks.com.
Awesome. I will go back. I'll make sure that I update the link. Unfortunately, I can't communicate that here. I'm not able to, it won't let me copy and paste a link, but I'll make sure that I do that on the page. So if you didn't catch that, I'll be sure to update it so that you'll know how to get in touch with Miss Charlene. So thank you for that. We're going to continue with this conversation. And Charlene, I would definitely like for you to jump in whenever you see fit. And we're going to go over the other communication boundaries that I wanted to bring to your attention, give you a few examples of them if you weren't sure, and then also provide you with, our gems. So let's see. I have a couple of comments here. Miss C. Nicole says, that's real good. Remain in control of your peace when trying to communicate. And then, nope, that was the last one that I see right here. So thank you so much, C, for that comment. So now we're going to move on to the boundaries, the communication boundaries that I'd like for us to further discuss. The first one is clear and explicit expectations. So when we talk about communication, if we are not clear in what we're saying, or we don't explicitly communicate what we are expecting, oftentimes we will not get the result, right? So we need to make sure that we're doing exactly that. Be clear in what you say. Charlene just mentioned that. She talked about in the workspace how if she's talking to a staff member or an employee, she'll say something and she'll ask them to repeat that back to her, right? She's really looking for clarity in that communication or in the conversation. So again, be clear about what it is that you're saying. I remember when I was still in executive management, and when we talk about setting like the expectations and of what is and what is not acceptable, right? Because that's really what we're talking about, like in terms of our communication. I recall, like Charlene says, I don't want to come off too strong, right? Like that's not your intention. You're not trying to be crossed, right? I recall though, in that environment, I had a boss who spoke to me in a way that just it wasn't respectful, right? As an executive manager, as you're dealing with everyone from interns to the CEO, CFO of the company. So how you deal with them and how they're receiving your words and your communication, one, yes, has to be clear, but the respect that needs to be put on it at all times, no matter or regardless of the level that you are in the company in, that's important. Everyone should be treated equally in that environment. So it was very disrespectful. And, I was much younger at the time, although I was in executive management, and I have to say, I had to take a couple breaths of my own to make sure that I communicated effectively back to her and didn't put myself in a situation. But it's very important that we are clear in how we are speaking to others and the expectations that we want them to have when they're talking back to us. It's all about respect, right? We have to respect each other and how we communicate and what's important to me in our communication. So that's our first communication boundary that I wanted to talk about. The second one is really my favorite of all of them, because I can tell you right now that some of you are not doing, maybe I can't tell you, that's not true. I would surmise that some of you are not, but that is active listening. Active listening, guys. So that means you're not multitasking. It is so crucial to understand and respect people's communication boundaries. So when you talk about being fully engaged, focused, right? Focused on the speaker, avoiding interruptions, the dog, the doorbell, the phone, scrolling, you're on your social media. Listen, active listening is you are completely and fully engaged with the person that you are talking with or that's talking to you, right? So just for that moment, right? Whether it's personal and specifically, all these things cross over. So when we're talking about being at home and you're talking to your spouse and they don't feel like you're paying attention or listening to them, that's problematic when you're doing other things or looking off or doing something else, right? Because they're like, hello, I'm talking to you. That could create a problem. At work, same thing. If you're engaged in a conversation with your employees, with staff members, or someone else of your superior, they're expecting you to be engaged. They're expecting you to be actively listening to what they're saying so that they know, one, like Charlene says, I don't have to repeat myself 17 times. I know hopefully you're getting what it is I'm telling you. And secondly, it's just about, again, respect. It's very important to do. So having or actively listening, we need to really take some time to make sure that we're showing up, right, in these conversations. We're not dismissing people without knowing that we're actually dismissing them. Looks like we have a couple. So we have, Devin, good evening, Mr. Devin. PK, thank you for showing up for us today. We have Miss Tanine Harmony. She's also dropping some nuggets in the chat for us on Facebook. Thank you, Tanine. So that way she's putting in your contact information. Thank you so much for that. So that way people have it real time. Also, Theresa Offer says, absolutely, put all your tasks to the side. Active listening, you also check for understanding. Absolutely. Awesome. So thank you all for showing up for us today.
Can I say something about the active listening?
Of course.
Yeah, I want to just say, someone had mentioned about keeping your peace, and there's something about being able to be present in the moment that helps you keep that peace. So I think it's so important, like you said, that not everybody is practicing it. I'm a culprit too, y'all, because I multitask. Okay. So I don't want you to think that I don't have to listen to this and put it into practice myself. But what I want to say about the active listening is that it saves you so much in peace, right? Because you don't have to repeat yourself, or you can fully be in the moment to hear exactly what is going on and even gauge if that person understands. Sometimes there's a lot of communication without the communication, if you follow what I'm saying. So active listening is not, just repeating it back, but there's something magical about being present in the moment with the active listening.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. It looks like Odette Easley. I know, Auntie O, I said it wrong. She's asking, how did you deal with disrespectful communication from your boss? So let me just address that really quickly. Yeah, so it wasn't easy. Like I said, I had to step away and I didn't step away far because, like I said, I was a little bit younger. Although I was in executive management, sometimes you have to tell yourself, okay, calm down. This is not the time nor the place to lose your cool. So I actually just had to think about what it was that I was about to say, and I had to very respectfully explain to her that I did not appreciate the tone that she was using with me. If she had some information or she needed to share something with me that I did not do appropriately or to her liking, it was very easy that we could have booked a conference room and had that conversation. But because at the time we were standing in the middle of the team that I was responsible for, we were right in where we sat at, I knew that I had to handle it with tact, because I did not want to lose the respect of my team, of my staff members or my teammates, as well as I did not want to disrespect myself. So I took it upon myself to calm the situation, communicate with her in a professional manner, and advise her that this, I didn't appreciate the way she was speaking to me, and that we could, take this conversation to a conference room or somewhere else where we could have a much more adult conversation without the ears of the rest of the staff hearing. So thank you, Odette, for that question. All right, so where are we? So our third communication boundary is nonverbal cues. So let me ask you, Ms. Charlene, before I even jump into this, because I know you got some good ones for us. Can you talk to me about what that means to you?
So there's a lot that is being said when you're not even speaking. It's just your mannerism, your shoulders, your leaning in, your distance from the conversation that is speaking volumes about where you're at in the conversation. It just, so I think there's a lot to be said in being able to listen or be able to identify what those nonverbal cues are.
Yes, and that's exactly what I have here. So we're talking about, again, body language, facial expressions, eye contact, right? Those are all communication. These are other ways of people communicating with you. Be aware and respect the cues when you see them for effective communication, right? If you see somebody is just kind of, they're no longer engaged, they're done. You have to figure out how you regain their attention, because there's something there that either it's in what you said, what you're asking for them to do, or it could be something even that's going on in their lives. We don't necessarily know, but what you do need to do is re-engage them, right? Because when someone's body language, or rather those nonverbal cues, are present, then you know that someone is no longer engaged. They may not agree with what you're saying. They're checked out. You even see frown faces sometimes when people are talking to you, and that's because maybe they're not agreeing with what you're saying, but you got to find a way to bring that back. And sometimes, and I know for me in the past, if I'm standing in front of someone and I acknowledge that, depending on who it is, especially if it's someone that I know personally, I may even touch their shoulder or touch their hand and say, is everything okay? Because it seems like, something's happening here, and I want to make sure that you understand where I'm coming from, or maybe there's a problem, or you are uncomfortable with what I'm saying, right? So figure out a way, depending on the person that you're speaking with, to understand how you reconnect and re-engage them, because we don't want to have a conversation with people that are just checked out, right?
Can I just say, I love how you said the touch, right? Because even without you saying what you said, just the fact that you use the touch to take a moment, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's saying something. You just took a moment.
Yes.
I sometimes, know, if people want me to touch them, so I get, everybody know I got some looks, so I'll be giving you the look, the touch, the look, something.
Yes.
Just
I know the look. Yes. Absolutely. I love the look though, because I'm all about that. So yes, absolutely. So that leads us to our fourth communication boundary: consent and permission. So get before you're discussing sensitive, conversation or sensitive or personal topics, with people, make sure that you're approaching the conversation as you should be. I'm going to say it that way, because there are difficult conversations that sometimes you have to have, obviously personally, but there are also difficult conversations that you have to have in your professional life. So not being sensitive to those conversations, or understanding that you do sometimes need to ask for that permission, you can be breaking other boundaries that those people may have. Some of it is about personal information, personal data, or it could just be that you're in an environment that does not allow for you to have that type of conversation with them. Or maybe you could, but you still need to just make sure that they're okay with it, right? That it's appropriate, right? To even engage in that conversation in an environment. Let me tell you, I was at a conference a little while back, and the conference was amazing. There were a few things about the background activities that were really not quite up to par when we considered the nature of the conference, the caliber of people that were going to be there, and just the person putting it on. So in the conversation, which it wasn't bad for us to have the dialogue, but where it went awry was that when we talk about being appropriate, right, because that's another part of that consent and permission, it's about having appropriate conversation for where you may be in that moment at that time. So where I went wrong was there were some things that I wasn't really happy with also, but rather than, and we talked about actually providing feedback to the host of the event. But we didn't get to the feedback part to the host before we started having additional conversation that really wasn't for me to truly engage in, right? It wasn't positive. And so when we talk about being appropriate, we weren't the only ones in that environment. There were other people sitting with us who may not have felt the same way, who also, maybe they thought things were going absolutely fantastically. And then there were other people who may have been closer friends or a party to the folks that were putting on the event. And at the end of the day, you don't know. So it's up to me to make sure that I'm maintaining the boundaries for myself in terms of not only who's talking, but what are they saying, and whether or not, if it doesn't align with what I feel to be appropriate or okay, I then have to take the responsibility and ask them, or like Charlene said, use one of those tactics and say, yeah, I don't think that's a good conversation for this, for the table, right? Maybe we can talk about this at a later time. But again, that's about, making sure that it's not sensitive information. So it's not private or personal data. I'm speaking about someone, regarding someone, but the environment that I was in, it just wasn't appropriate. So just be mindful of that. Make sure that, again, your communication, it's timely, it's appropriate, that you're asking for permission as need be, and that you're not, if it doesn't align with the values that you have, to Charlene's point, choose one of those tips to just kind of table that at the moment and move on to something more positive that you need to be talking about. Because again, we all make mistakes, but that happened to be one of mine. So that's just the real thing, right? Because I know for me, that's not the woman that I am. I know that's not the woman God created me to be. So you need to keep those negative words or those things that are just not truly for me away from me. So I say, if you find yourself in that same kind of position, consider that for yourself. So, all right. So moving on, we are going to communication boundary number 5, feedback and open dialogue. So when we're talking about communication boundaries, we talk about what we need, but we also need to make sure that we are creating a space for people to communicate with us in a, or dialogue with us, especially if it's something that's sensitive, uncomfortable, puts you in a vulnerable space. I know for me, and Charlene is probably, I think maybe she experienced this with me at least once. When I'm in a place where I have to be really vulnerable, even doing the Fearless Fridays, this is a very, very vulnerable space for me also, because I have to talk about not just what's the topic, but how the topic affects me or how it has affected me and what I'm planning to do or how I'm working through it or have worked through it to bring it to you. But when I'm in a vulnerable place, I'm very uncomfortable, right? And if there's not, if you haven't created a space where I can have that kind of dialogue with you, that's safe for me to be in, to have the dialogue, typically I'm not going to do that because, you know, I'd rather hold on to it than to communicate it, or to have you or engage you with it. But when you are in an environment where someone is happy to listen, provide you with feedback, and typically even with feedback where they're asking, you know, would you like feedback? Because sometimes in those conversations, you're not asking for feedback. You just want to be able to have an open conversation. So there's a difference between I'm looking for you to provide me with feedback versus I'm just want to make sure that you understand this is where I'm at, right? Because this allows me to have my thoughts, my feelings, my concerns, even if it's a boundary issue, expressed when we're in an open, or you know, we have an opportunity to have this open dialogue. And then it also helps you in resolving conflict because, you know, maybe there's something that's been going on that you don't even know about that I've been just kind of dealing with. And so here it is now, I'm able to bring that to you and you can receive it from me differently. And if there's feedback that you'd like to provide, especially if there's a tip or a tool or a way you think that I could potentially manage this differently in the future, great, right? Because now this is the kind of interaction that we really want to have when we talk about communication. So it goes back to what Charlene said in the beginning, right? There is no relation without communication. So we have to continue to make sure that we are doing just that. Mr. Devin says, my brother always asks, how can I show up for you in this moment? What a nice way to say that. How can I show up for you in this moment? So I appreciate that because things like that, just like the tips that Charlene stated earlier, those are great ways for us to show that we're showing support, we're being empathetic, and we're allowing for you to share your thoughts, your feelings, your concerns. And I know for me, that's very important. Some people don't, you know, people who don't know me really, really well, or they know me kind of from a business perspective, much like you, Charlene, it's, you know, it's business first, you know, and I have a lot of, you know, I won't say I don't have a lot of tolerance, but it comes off that way. You know, we're just like, let's get it done. Where we at with this business? Okay. So like, I'm a finger snapper. Like, okay, where we at? What we got left? What we doing? Right. So for me, when that's not what's happening, you know, yeah, well, we're gonna leave that one where it is, but it's just very, very, you know, it's very important. So, all right, so what do we do from here, guys? Let's talk about that. Let's drop these gems. Before we do, let me say hello to Miss Jocelyn Stringer. We have her watching with us. Mr. Mac Wells, my cousin Tanya. Hey, Tanya. And my auntie, Latanya Arthur-Mensa. Thank you so much all for being here and showing up for us. We really do appreciate it. Charlene is amazing. I'm so grateful that she was able to join us today. I thank you all for being here as well. So now let's get into these gems. So the first gem I have is self-awareness. Now, developing self-awareness is, right, I mean, that's how you identify what your own communication boundaries are, understand how they affect, right, your interactions with other people. It also allows you to reflect on, like, what are my patterns? What are the triggers that I have? And what areas of improvement do I need, right? So if you're not aware of who you are, like Charlene said, look, this is who I am. I know this is how I might show up, but we know, if you know me, this isn't what my intention is, but knowing who you are is critical in that, right? So be self-aware, understand how the boundaries that you do have or do not have, how is that impacting others? and your interactions with them, and find out what your triggers are. We all have triggers. Be clear about what your triggers are so that you are clear about how you need to improve for yourself, right? For yourself, for your family, for your friends, for your business, right? Because we don't want nothing affecting our money. So let's get that right. All right, gem number 2. All right, respect and empathy. Yeah, I know. It's kind of a, some people say that's a woman thing. It's not. Having respect and empathy for others is critical, right? It cultivates a mindset of respect towards other people, empathy towards other people. So put yourself in someone else's shoes, right? So if you're having a challenge with something, think about how someone else might be feeling. If someone spoke to you in a particular way, and you didn't, or they felt like, or they didn't like it, or maybe you heard, because we've done this. I've listened to other people talking to others, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like, that's a no. That's a no, absolute no. So the thing is, it's like, no, we can't do, well, I can't interject into someone else's conversation, but what it does do is it allows me to think about the times when I may be doing the same thing or have done the same thing, and how that might have been perceived by others around me. And so I don't want that for myself. I don't want that for anyone else that I'm communicating with. And I certainly want to provide, like I said before, a safe place for people to be able to speak to me, engage with me, communicate with me. So there's that. It promotes a dialogue and encourages people to speak up also. So, sorry, is that this one? I might have just got ahead of myself, guys. I did. Sorry. Let's go to my next gem. That was open and honest communication. All right. So this one is where I was just going. So open and honest communication allows you to create a safe space for people. And again, they can feel free and comfortable expressing themselves and their boundaries. Again, professionally, it can foster an environment that, again, like I just mentioned, promotes dialogue and encourages other people to speak up, right? We don't want a bunch of folks that are working for us that don't, speak up. They're not communicating any concerns or issues that they may be having, or, because sometimes in a work environment, we might sit back and not say anything because we don't want to ruffle any feathers. We're fearful of, the impact it may have on our employment, or what the boss or my lead or my manager or something might think of me. But at the end of the day, if you're not speaking up for yourself, or if you're not communicating, if there's something that you need to talk about, the person that's going to be greatest impacted is you. So don't hold it in. This is what we're here for. And if you're uncomfortable talking to the person directly, if it's appropriate, then talk to your HR department or someone else that you can. So again, just be clear about having that open and honest communication. It is imperative. Our 4th gem is conflict resolution and mediation. And what does that mean? I know it's all the big words, but the reality is just understanding how you can amicably resolve any conflict, right? Really stand in the gap if you need to, if there's a problem and you need to mediate between a couple of people because maybe there's not clarity in the communication, or someone is maybe taking something personal, whatever the case may be. You may need to be in a space where you need to mediate for them. And just remember that these are things that all we're talking about today is how we better communicate. That is so important, right? And making sure that we understand the boundaries that we have for ourselves, personally, professionally, and how we want others to feel when we're communicating with them. Right. And respecting the boundaries that they may have. They may be different than mine or yours, whatever the case is, but it is important for us all to have respect for one another in that regard. So communication is key. I love it. I'm going to keep saying it. There is no relation without communication. I love that statement. I'm like, that's that. I'm going to put that down somewhere. I don't know where. That might be in one of my affirmations this week. Because after we do our Fearless Fridays, starting Sunday, we do affirmations every day. Some of them are personal and professional, but really, when we talk about your growth personally, it typically tends to assist you in your growth professionally. So, take those things to heart. When you see the affirmations, take an opportunity to read them if they resonate with you, and just, say them to yourself so that, you can get that down into your spirit as well. So those are the 4 gems that we have for today. I appreciate you all for being here. Again, we have the wonderful Charlene Harry here with us. I have a quote before we get ready to close out the show. The quote that I found was by an unknown, but I kind of liked it because it kind of brings it home for me. It says, boundaries in communication are like fences around a garden. They protect the beauty within while also respecting the space and needs of others. So I thought that was kind of a really cool quote to be considered, kind of as you go through your week. I would love for you all, if you have not done so already, to please remember to follow, comment, even if you go on and put in one takeaway from this show on communication boundaries, or any of the others, relationship boundaries, financial boundaries, any of the other boundary conversations that we've had. Coming up next week, we are going to be discussing health boundaries with Dr. Candace White. She is the lifestyle doctor, so we'll be talking to her. Again, you can find me, as you see on the banner that's scrolling, you can find me on Facebook. This is our final week with Talina Speaks, or our Fearless Fridays, under my normal page. It will from now on be under the Talina Speaks page. So if you haven't done so, please go to Talina, T-E-Lena, and then Speaks on Facebook. Please be sure to follow, like, comment. I need to get this algorithm going. This is all brand new, and I'm building this platform and this environment. So I definitely need your help to do so. I've started a YouTube channel, so I'll start posting the Fearless Fridays there as well. And then on Instagram, it's on Instagram and YouTube, it's at I Am Talina on both of them. That's I Am Talina on Instagram and YouTube. And then finally, in the weeks to come, I'm also, for any of you that are business owners, entrepreneurs, aspiring business owners, or if you know a few that are aspiring or are business owners, I am going to be holding a masterclass. It will be free. It's going to be on June 17th at 8 a.m. The link will be on my page on all 3 of those platforms. You can register if you'd like. Again, that's going to be on June 17th at 8 a.m. It's going to be a business basics masterclass, and it's going to be called Boss Up for Business. And that's where we're going to have some conversations around how you need to boss up for your business so you can get ready to do your thing. So we're going to talk about a number of the things that we're talking about with boundaries, but then we're going to do not a deep dive, but we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can effectively move from the mindset of a business operator to truly being the owner of your business. So again, that wraps up another episode of Fearless Fridays, where we empower you to embrace your fear, ignite your potential, and fearlessly thrive in life and in business. We appreciate you. Thank you, Charlene. If you can come off mute, I appreciate you being here. Yes. Thank you so much to all of you that signed on with us today. I cannot wait to see you all next week. Until then, bye.
Thank you so much, guys.